What is your oh crap, I've got to get the heck out of here right now story? Living in Baltimore some years back, and I was driving home through a rough area of the city, sitting at a stoplight behind an already stopped car. Another pulls up next to me on the right, not really thinking anything of this. The light turns green. Neither of these cars move and I see a car zipping up behind me. I look to my left and I see two guys running towards me. I am so thankful that I left a good deal of space between me and the car in front. I hooked it around the car I front and sped off. Pretty sure I was going to be a victim of a carjacking or maybe something worse. Glad they ill-timed their plan and I gave myself that space. Lesson here is always keep your head on a swivel in Baltimore. Guy I knew stopped behind a car at a stop street. As soon as he stopped, the people in the car in front of him jumped out and ran to the back of their car, so towards him. He reversed and hit the car behind him. The people in front ran around their car to the opposite sides. They were just switching seats drivers. 3 years ago, a heavy 7.1 megawatts earthquake hit the center of Mexico. I was in the 3rd floor of my school building when the horrible sounding seismic alarm went off and the building began shaking like jello. Bookshelves falling, parts of the ceiling crumbling over, people screaming. It was heck. In all of that madness, your only instinct is yelling at you to get your butt out of the effing building. Picture this. You know that tons of steel and concrete will fall over you if you don't. However, and it's a big however, unless you're in the ground level floor of the building. That is, you don't have to take any stairs elevator to get out and the exit is nearby. You must fight against that instinct. It is vital to stay where you are and crawl next to a desk, chair, bed. Anything that can shield you against the debris of the falling building. Thing is, if the building collapses and you are midway through to the exit, your survival chances are pretty thin. Even more so considering that stairs are the first structures to collapse in an earthquake. So, all of my classmates and I stayed in fetal position next to our desks, fighting against our get the heck out of here right now instincts, waiting for the earthquake to pass. In the end, thankfully, our school didn't collapse in the earthquake, but several buildings in the vicinity did. Interesting fact, the silence immediately after an earthquake is terrifying. Then you start hearing dogs bark, helicopters buzzing and ambulances sirens. When I was hanging out with my ex and I saw the drug dealer pull up, I had around 30 days clean and even though I wanted to use I just couldn't do it anymore. I grabbed what I could carry and left. I left for good and now have 12 years clean. Was sleeping at a friend's house. Went to the kitchen to get some water. Her father hugged me from behind. I was 14, I guess. Never went to their house again. We were digging out some dirt and rocks to make room for some steps to a lower portion of a patio that had a gas line running to a fire pit. I'm there with my boss and supervisor and all of a sudden I hear a whooshing sound of depressurization of a gas line and sprint away. Turns out it was only pressurized with air and not gas at that point and we just had to get someone to come fix the hole we made without needing to evacuate the job site. My boss gave me crap but I'll have the same reaction if it ever happens again. I was in downtown NYC a couple of blocks away from the WTC gawking at a fire. There were tons of people milling around watching. They had blocked off some streets, and I asked a cop how I could get around to where I needed to go further downtown. He told me which streets were closed, but that they might expand it, so I should get moving. The conversation was pretty casual. As I started walking away I looked back, and he had his radio to his ear, and whatever he heard, he panicked, went as white as a ghost, and started yelling for people to move further back. I turned around and jogged the heck out of there and made it to the Brooklyn Bridge before the first tower came down. Jogged the heck out of there. I don't think I've ever read that phrase before. St. Patrick's Day, midnight. I, 26 at the time, was walking home from the Irish bar I worked in. Saw a lad attack a girl and run. Checked on the lass to make sure she was alright. Stayed with her until the police arrived. Gave my statement. Told them I was nervous about walking home. Two guys who were on the scene offered to walk me home. Policeman said there you go, you're sorted. That's right. Sent me off with two strangers. I scolded myself for being so nervous. Told myself it was really nice of them to offer to walk me home. We were about halfway to my house when they started talking about what they'd witnessed. How that girl deserved to be attacked. And that their friend, The attacker had done nothing wrong. My spidey senses weren't just tingling, they were electrifying. We were coming up to the last populated street before the dark alleyway and then the park that I needed to walk through to get home. I knew if I kept walking with these guys, I was in danger. I just freaking knew. I checked my phone and told them my friend was in the conveniently nearest club just across the road, thanked them for their offer to walk me home, and headed to the club entry before they could say anything. Jumped in a taxi. As we drove past the alleyway, those suckers were waiting for me. They'd called my bluff about going into the club, and they were watching out for me. I don't know what they'd have done to me, but that's my biggest listen to your instincts story, and I'm really freaking glad I did. I was kicking myself because my manager, who was also my friend mutual crush, had offered to walk me home, but I didn't want him having to walk all the way home himself in the other direction after. I was driving north on I-65 in the middle of Indiana. The sky was getting dark. The wind was picking up. It started hailing. I turned on the radio to hear that a tornado was nearby. I determined it was behind me going from SW to NE and about to cross over the interstate. Other cars were driving slow or pulling over because of the rain and hail. I was hauling butt to get away from there. I lived in South Everett, WA for a couple years. Was walking home from the bus stop to my apartment, which took me behind the Home Depot. Suddenly a van starts following me. I hear the side door slide open and look behind me to see a man with the top half of his body hanging out the slider door looking at me. I took off running towards my apartment, literally running as far as I could. The van started going faster. By chance a guy was pulling out of the driveway of my apartment complex, sees me running for my life, and stops. The van immediately turns around and speeds off. Guy asks if I'm okay. I ask him to just stay there and please watch me walk into my apartment, which was the building next to his. He did. Thank God. I started carrying mace and a very large knife the next day. One of my good friends was stabbed in SE Everett. I'm sorry that happened to you and that it can be such a rough place. I was walking to my house from my ex-house very early in the morning when I saw this little girl with a backpack running for her life from two big street dogs. At that moment I didn't think and I ran towards the dogs and missed a kick. The two dogs came after me, biting my legs and arm. They were out of control and these were like the longest 5 minutes of my life. I couldn't stop them from biting me. The little girl kept running until I didn't see her anymore. It was just me and the dogs attacking me. I tried to climb a fence to get inside a house but I couldn't when a taxi driver stopped and went out of the car with a short stick and he tried to scare them off, giving me a chance to run in without thinking. I got inside the car. The guy just ran a couple of times around the car with the dogs behind until he got in and he drove off like really fast. He took me to the hospital where I got a lot of stitches on my legs, arms and hands. That guy is my hero. Every now and then I go to his taxi stop and give them sandwiches or something. We never knew what happened to those dogs. You probably saved that kid's life. I was solo camping in the woods during a phase where I wanted to be a survival expert. I hiked out, miles from any roads or building, built a shelter and then hiked back the way I came. Less than a mile away from my camp, I found a dead coyote, decapitated, gutted, and laid out like a sacrifice or something. The eyes were gouged out and it was strung across a big, flat rock. A rock which I used as a marker on the way in, so I know it hadn't been there a day before. I ran out of there as fast as I could, knife at the ready, probably 10 miles back to my house. I still have no idea who would have done it, but I know I didn't want to run into them in the woods alone. Sounds like that day you were a survival expert. I woke up one Friday in a hotel and the internet was down. I went to the hotel lobby to see what was up and saw scenes of chaos on the TV. A crowd had started to gather to watch, including the hotel staff. One employee told me the government had shut down the internet to test it. The scenes on the TV were of violent protests beginning all over Egypt as people made their first push to occupy Tahrir Square. It was the 25th of January, 2011 and I was in Benghazi, Libya, without my US passport. Needless to say, I spent my energy over the next few days trying to get out of the country. I was able to leave but many of the people I was working with weren't as lucky. The revolution started in Benghazi less than 2 weeks later. It was surreal watching Anderson Cooper broadcasting live from the hotel I had just been staying in. I was the only white guy working at a Hispanic restaurant and I don't speak Spanish, that's part of it. One night after work I get invited to drink at one of their houses. All is going good with drinking and I even danced a bit. Then after going outside to the back patio to smoke a cigarette I come back inside and the guy whose house I was at has a knife and is yelling at these 3 co-workers of mine, blocking the front door, yelling in Spanish that no one is leaving. I knew that much. A bar patron who knew me grabbed me and pleaded to the guy just to let me and him out since we had no part in it. The homeowner lets us both out. I ask the bar patron WTF was that when we're outside since I can't speak Spanish, and he says the guy thinks my 3 co-workers are sleeping with his wife and he's probably about to kill them. I got in my car and got the F out of there. I was on a restaurant and they were using a propane tank to power an outdoors heater. Suddenly the tank started to catch fire and I got out quickly because I thought it was going to explode. The staff turned the tank off and everyone laughed at me for overreacting, but dang, I got scared, lol. Oh, what a pee. You're afraid of exploding propane tanks. My friend and I met at Waffle House for lunch. A guy came into the restaurant looking for a piece of paper that he had accidentally left on a table. The waitress didn't know where the paper was located and might have thrown it away. The guy got upset saying the paper was important and he was going home to get his gun stored under his mattress. My friend and I quickly paid our check and got the heck out of the restaurant. Yep, that's Waffle House. Mine is more laughable and my dad likes to tell it, but it's the only thing that comes to mind. I was with my dad at a car shop his friend owned. He was visiting said friend and had just brought me along. They were working on some old car, and I wasn't paying much attention as an 8-year-old, but they sprayed something on a piece of the engine as they were turning it on or hitting the gas or something, and it made this big flame appear for just a second or two. Well, in that second or two I had ran several yards to the street because I had seen way too many movies of cars exploding. There were like 5 men including my dad all standing around and they were laughing their asses off. They call this gas start you bastard over here. Genuine name used by all mechanics. My husband and I were heading out of town. We saw a guy on the side of the highway pacing under the overpass. I asked my husband to take the exit and go over the overpass and take the next exit to continue on the highway. The second we took the exit, the guy jumped in front of a semi and killed himself. He was a freshman in college. The semi driver was 72 years old and 3 weeks away from retiring. I cannot imagine what the driver is going through. Was waiting for the next bus in a bus station at 2 AM in Minneapolis. A security guard outside told me to stay within the camera zone. I sat down and waited, all alone except a couple of junkies in another part of the station. Suddenly a guy comes in and walks up to me. This guy dressed in a black hoodie wearing a skeleton mask stood right in front of me. Didn't say a word, just stood there and looked at me. When he started to walk away I bolted out of there, ran down the street and luckily found a 24/7 Walgreens. When I was 17 I met with a 23-year-old guy for a mall date. Can't remember his name for the life of me. I had just gotten out of a horrible relationship and was trying to distract myself. We had dinner and when the waiter brought the check, the guy told me he had forgotten his wallet in his car and that if I went with him he could grab it. I told him it was fine and paid for the meal myself. We went into a couple shops, but he kept asking me questions about my ex-boyfriend. Also he mentioned that he had been in jail but wouldn't tell me what for, and I was nervous. Then things came to a head when he kept saying, "Hey, just come to my car for a second please, let's listen to music," and kept getting increasingly anxious every time I declined. I was so scared. I immediately pretended to have a period emergency so I could get out of there, and luckily I had parked in a different lot than he did. I still have no idea what his intentions were, but man, that was terrifying. I'm glad you trusted your gut and got the heck out of there. I was in Thailand back in 2010, on the southern islands after a full moon party. My friend and I were talking to 2 girls who invited us to play poker. We went and sat down with 2 German guys and 2 burly Thai guys full of tattoos and began to play. They were joking, friendly, and the buy-in was $10. We lost some pots, won some pots, and overall it was a happy experience. The Thai guys beat us and on the last hand I managed to claw my chips back to about $8. My friend was looking tired so I gave him the nod. I thanked for the game and I said we would cash out and we would be on our way. The Thai guys put a machete on the table and told us to frick off. My friend, myself and the 2 German guys noped out of that situation as fast as we could. On the way back the girls caught up with us and apologized, but it meant frick all because they were clearly in on the take. Lesson learned: if pretty girls ask you to play a game, it's for nefarious reasons. In high school I went to a party in a recently abandoned house on the outskirts of town. There were a lot of people I knew there but also a lot of shady folks I was unfamiliar with. Things started out okay, or at least as okay as they can for a party with a bunch of liquored up teenagers. As the night wore on people started destroying things. I guess just because the place was abandoned. I left when someone threw a toilet out of an upstairs window. I found out later that the cops showed up. Several people ran from them through a nearby cornfield but were caught. A friend of mine ran right into a barbed wire fence however and ended up in the hospital. It's all fun and games until a toilet gets thrown out the window. Hope your friend's okay though. When I was in high school, early 80s, I saw a lot of heavy metal bands. I had a friend who could always get us backstage after the show. So Anvil played and we went backstage. All of a sudden the lead singer said, "Okay, all the girls take off your clothes or get out." I got out. The rest of the girls stayed. Google's Anvil. Yeah, man. That's a hard pass for me. Was 15-16ish. Drunk at a party. Half passed out on a couch with some dude pawing at me. I was conscious, but barely, and was too tired to make him stop until I heard him tell someone else help me get her to the other room. Could be he wanted to let me sleep it off in peace. But I doubt it. I forced myself awake, found my, equally young and drunk, friend and made it out to the front yard where we were able to catch a ride home with somebody's older sibling. Oh my god, this was scary. I was living in France on my own and I got a tutoring client. A man wanted me to teach his young daughter. First session he offers to drive me home, spends the entire time asking about a boyfriend, where I live, etc. Second session he wants to give me a tour of his house. I noticed he was standing in the door when we went into a room. Once we got to the second floor, I grabbed his daughter so nothing would happen. After that I tried to quit and he guilted me into coming 3 more times. Every time I got so anxious beforehand I wanted to puke. Every time he would offer a ride and I took the 2 hours of buses home instead. Finally I fully broke it off. I knew something bad was going to happen to me and confirmed it with a few other young English speaking women I knew. He was recruiting at best his second wife, but they all got extremely bad feelings being alone with him. Reminds me of what happened with Lindsay Hawker. She lived in the village next to me, taught English in Japan, never came back. Poor girl. I was living at a pretty upscale apartment complex. The perimeter was lined with really nice ground level townhome units. This one guy moved into one and he was kind of odd. On warm days he'd walk around shirtless in the complex's park, which is odd for PNW. But I mean okay. Then he started pasting Bible verses to his window. Now I'm not saying liking the Bible is an issue, but that was an alarm bell. Then he started writing in chalk all over the Bible verses pasted to his window. Then one night I took my dogs for a walk. It was during about when my dogs weren't sleeping much and needed 2 AM walks. I go down to the park area in front of these townhome units. Lots of bushes and trees. My dogs are pee in the bushes and suddenly my girl dog gets slow and starts growling. We notice there are boots in the bushes. I then look around and notice a dozen figures in black tactical gear and masks. Virtually invisible. I freeze and start to panic. One of them puts his finger to his mask, I assume where his mouth was. I got the hint and bolted. Right as I get to the entrance of my apartment I see them take a battering ram to the door and drag the Bible verse guy out completely naked as he screams about how God is judging them. The unit smelled horrible and was left as is for months. Eventually a nice couple moved in. I asked the building management what happened and I was given a look and told you don't want to know. I really want to know. Bad diesel fire at work. I saw the fireball billowing toward me so I jumped in a pit. The fireball blew over me, and when it retreated, I got the heck out of Dodge. I got some gnarly 3rd-degree burns, but I survived. As a young teenager, maybe 13 yo, I was camping in the backcountry during a summer camp in the Midwest US. Second to last night of the trip we started seeing mammothous clouds and the sky turned green, but no immediate rain or hail. Being the good Midwestern kids we were, we knew the signs and found a semi-solid shelter before the storm hit. When we got out of the backcountry we found out that 3 major tornadoes had touched down and gotten as close as 1-2 km to our original campsite. As a New Yorker I would just stared at the pretty sky and probably die. Went on a vacation with a friend that I had only known for a little while, few months to a year kinda thing. We went to Texas together. We're from Michigan. She told me we were going to meet up with her cousins to go tubing while we were down there. No problem. Turned out we were staying with like a dozen of her family members for 3 days for a memorial trip they were doing for her uncle who had passed, most of whom she hadn't seen in a long time, like 5 years. So it's a whole but memorial reunion trip. Literally everyone who's there is either blood related, married in, or a fiance, except me, already awkward AF. So the tubing trip we were supposed to go on is the official memorial for the uncle who passed. Friend's cousin, daughter of the deceased, comes to me in private before we go tubing and asks me to take a family picture for them since I'm the odd man out. Of course, least I can do. She says take one nice one, and then for the second she wants it to be funny, and that they have this running family joke where someone counts down and yells BJ and takes a picture as everyone reacts. Reluctant, but in a weird but situation and just trying to be the nice guy, I agree to that too. A couple hours later, they dump the ashes in the river, say their piece, ready to take pictures. One regular one, check. Then I do the running family joke one. I count down and yell out BJ's and no one laughs except the cousin who told me to. Everyone looks horrified. Friend's mom looks so confused and just earnestly wants to know, why would you say that? And I'm standing there asking myself earnestly, why would you say that? Luckily the cousin told everyone she had asked me to say that and that she has told me it was a family joke. To which everyone asked her, whose family? Awesome. After it was all said and done, I walked up the trail away from everyone. Definitely cried from how awkward it was, and simultaneously looked for day of flights home. Stuck it out for the other 2 days instead though. First and last trip with that friend. Jesus, that sounds awful. I would have bounced immediately. I was in early high school and for an easy high school job I did some yard work for some of my neighbors. There was one older guy 2 doors down who asked me to pull weeds, weed eat his backyard fence and push mow the yard. I finished this and was told to come back that evening so he could get cash to pay me. So far you may be wondering why I am posting this here, but it gets weirder. I went over later and he had clearly been drinking, and I had to listen to him for 15 minutes while he looked for the cash he supposedly just got. Then he kept getting closer to me and he asked me to come down to his man cave to help set up his Wii and that he'd pay me a little more. I grabbed the cash and hightailed it out of there and never spoke to him again. I have never been more creeped out by another human being. I'm glad you didn't enter his cave and have to see his Wii. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.